Closer than my every breath, closer than every step, closer than the song I sing, closer than anything, closer than my every breath, closer than every step, closer than the song I sing, closer than anything, closer than my every breath, closer than every step, closer than the song I sing, closer than anything. I need your love like I need water. I need your love like I need breath inside of my lungs, burning my heart just like a fire. Come and take me over, Jesus, draw me closer. I need your love, and I need your love like I need water. I need your love like I need breath inside of my lungs, burning my heart just like a fire. Come and take me over, Jesus, draw me closer to your heart, to your heart, to your heart. That's our prayer, Jesus, that we want to be close to your heart. We want to know your heart. We say that's the whole reason we gather, that we're centered around your life, your love, and your justice, Jesus. And so would you reveal to us your heart? Would you lead us in the rest of our time together today? Amen. You can have a seat.
Thank you, team. Thank you, Familia, for being with us today. We are the church we hope for. We say that we are a beloved community, moved by the Spirit to follow the life, love, and justice of Jesus. This moved by the Spirit piece is really important to us. We've been in a series called The Story of the Spirit for several months now, and today we'll come to a conclusion. We'll get to hear a word from our very own dear Nicola Patton, so she'll be bringing a word today. But before we hear from Nicola, we'll worship a little bit more. Just a little bit, we'll send out our middle school, high schoolers. They'll have their time today. But we want to take a moment to pause and to stop and to listen to a dear brother of ours, Caleb Parker. There you are. You're normally here. Where are you? You start to learn where people are in the room, and then they move on you and throw it off. So back at the beginning of May, we first heard from Caleb and Noemi as they cast this vision for us to come alongside OC United and to help kids get to camp. Kids went to camp, and we want to stop and pause. We want to hear how camp was. So y'all welcome Caleb as he comes and gives us a testimony.
So welcome, Leah. Yeah, like Bobby said, my name's Caleb, and I work at a nonprofit over in Fullerton called OC United that I've shared about a little bit here and there throughout the last few years. But the short version is we work with kids, teens, and their families who've experienced different kinds of trauma and create a space for them to be able to heal in safe relationships. So Noemi, who's not here today, and we run some of our programming where we do after-school programs as like a space to create a sense of family and to create a healing environment where we can just have honest conversations about what we experienced and advocate for change in our communities. But about 3-4 weeks ago, we took 30 teenagers to camp up in the San Bernardino Mountains. And we're trying to create a space where it could be a launching point for the rest of the school year. We see our kids all year round, and we see them for years on end. And so we really lean into the slow work of transformation and healing. And so I know for both Noemi and I, a lot of our camp experiences were these high mountaintop experiences. And we wanted to try to instead aim for a slow foundation pouring. And so over the 3 days, we leaned into those basic conversations of what's your support system? What is the pain that you're carrying? What does hope look like for you? What would courage look like to some of these barriers that you feel? But where we felt like God was at work most was in the space in between all those conversations, where almost like the air that was drying the foundation was really where we saw God most present. For a lot of our kids, it was just the foundation of feeling safe and the foundation of knowing that they're loved, to where for some of our middle schoolers, the first thing we did when we got there was eating lunch, and they sit down and they look at the spread of a camp buffet and look at each other and are amazed and ask, we get to eat like this all weekend? And one of their brothers, who is one of our staff, looked at his brother and was like, yeah, we do. And just that safety of knowing the consistency of, I'm gonna have that meal every time, and I can always go back for more. Or going into our cabins and setting up our sheets on our beds, and some of our kids having never had a bed for themselves, and so getting to teach them, this is what a fitted sheet is, and this is how you set this up, and that safety that just comes with knowing that they have their own space and that they have those safe adults in their environment caring for them. Or one of our 7th grade boys who, in that time after dinner, when everyone's just kind of like settling down, just in tears with one of our staff, because he had been gone for a while and he popped back up after a year, and just tears, not because he was having crisis, just he was thankful that he had family here, and was remembering what it felt like to have that safety. So there was a lot of like really big moments, but like the parts that I feel like were most beautiful were just those in-between spaces of, again, like pouring that foundation and letting it go slowly, and letting it dry so that we could launch into a strong school year. So we're 2 weeks into our school year and already seeing like the fruit of camp, of where the group dynamic and the sense of connection is where we would normally be at in December, and that's where we were at on day 1. Or even just having common language where at the beginning of the year, some of our junior hires were feeling like they were being discriminated against by another group, and they had common language to what do we do when we hit these barriers, and what does it mean for us to have a safe space to change those things. So all to say, thank you to all of you, because while you might not have been up there in the mountains with us, you were there with us, because this church community has helped shape what this became, and has poured so much into these 30 teenagers, whether they realize it or not. One, on the financial end of all of you supporting so generously for us to be able to add this to what we did for last year, to where it wouldn't have been able to happen without the generosity of this church, but also in just like the support emotionally and spiritually and socially that this church provides, of being a sounding board as we were figuring out how do we create a space that looks and feels different than the typical camp, and giving ideas and giving feedback and being there and asking how it went and checking in partway through the weekend. This church was there with us, as God was with us there too. So thank you to you all.
We're okay. Thank you, Caleb. If you're able, would you rise with us as we continue to sing?
There's nothing worth more that could ever come close. Nothing can compare. You're our living hope. It's your presence, Lord. And I've tasted and seen of the sweetest of loves, where my heart becomes free and my shame is undone. In your presence, Lord. So Holy Spirit, you are welcome here. Come flood this place and fill the atmosphere. Your glory
Buenas tardes, church. I'm not preaching this evening, I'm just saying something right before the preacher comes up. But if I have not met you before, or you have not met me, my name is Inez Velasquez McBride, and I'm one of the co-lead pastors here at the church we hope for. And I have been gone for 2 Sundays, and I feel like I've been gone forever. 2 Sundays that I don't see your faces, I feel a little disoriented, so it's good to be back home. And I'm glad that I'm here with you all as well. I'd like to invite the middle school and high school students now to go back there with Josh and Mindy, and I think there's some special things going on back there, so I wish I was going with y'all back there. So this is your time to go back there with our amazing leaders. We have been in the sermon series, The Story of the Spirit. We started in the Old Testament, we went into the New Testament, we went into some of the Pauline epistles as well, and today is the last sermon series on the story of the Spirit. And so because we started in the Old Testament and went through the New, we're going back to the Old Testament. We thought to invite someone who loves the Old Testament and studies the Old Testament as a job. It's your main thing. So Nicola Patton is one of our own. You've heard her preach before if you've been with us before. She is a PhD student of Old Testament. So we thought, hey, would you like to preach on the Old Testament and finish the story of the Spirit? So I'd like to invite Nicola to come up, and please give her your welcome as she finishes this the story of the Spirit with us and get to hear part of your story as well. So let me pray for us. Señor y Padre Celestial, tú que estás en el cielo y en todo lugar, te damos gracias por este tiempo. Te damos gracias por tu amor, por tu bondad y por tu misericordia. And God, just like we were singing just a minute ago, we do need your love like we need water. We do need your love like we need breath in our lungs. And so God, may everything that's happening today, may we be attentive. May our souls and our bodies be like soft soil that receives the water of your presence, the water of your word, and the breath of the Spirit that you have for us today. I pray that we would be met by your grace, and I pray that this sermon also will be met by your grace, by the giver and also us, the receivers. In Jesus' name, amen and amen.
Thank you. How funny would it be if I suddenly was like, actually, we're going to be in the New Testament today. She's like, no, that wouldn't happen. I don't read the New Testament. That's what she makes fun of me for. I do read the New Testament, in case anyone's wondering, but my time is spent mostly in the Old Testament, or the First Testament, as we like to call it. This is, like we said, the last sermon in the series, The Story of the Spirit, but it's certainly not. Someone's excited. We can keep going, Serena. We really can, you know. Challenge accepted. But it's definitely not the last word. It may be the last sermon, but it's definitely not the last word that the Spirit has for us on the story of the Spirit. And I'm pretty excited to be preaching this sermon today because this is something that's been brewing in my heart for, I guess it's several years now. It's sort of a culmination of things that have happened in my life, things that I've had questions about, things that I've raged to God in the shower about and talked to other people about. And it's this idea of silence. And if you know anything about me, I don't do well with silence, especially in relationship or communication or business. I get really irritated when there's silence. And I think God is like, yep, I know. And so what we're going to talk about today is, where does the Spirit show up in silence? Now, I realized that the last time I preached a sermon, or the last 2 times, my context has been very big. So again, I'm going to make a very big context for you. For those of you that are following along, we are in 1 Kings 18 and 19. I'll share some more specifics on 19, but to give you kind of the background here, this is a time in Israel where there are kings, there is a variety of prophets and so on. I won't give you all the backstory. I will nerd out with you later if you really want to. But at this point, a prophet named Elijah is active in the life of the kingdom of Israel. And he's not very popular with the king, because the king is Ahab, and you may have heard Ahab and Jezebel, and you may have heard the name Jezebel Jezebel 1,000 times over. But don't get me started on Jezebel and how that name has been attributed to women in purity culture and all the things and how that's been used against women and weaponized. I basically think that she was just a woman surviving in a man's world as a foreigner, but we'll leave that all for another sermon. What's happening in Israel at this time is there is a conglomeration of worship. They're trying to decide, they can't decide if they want to worship Yahweh, Israel's traditional God, or the Baals, in America we like to call them Baals. But my Hebrew training is like, no. These are the gods of Jezebel. She's not an Israelite. She's a foreigner. She's a foreign princess that, of course, marriage alliances, blah, blah, blah. So she has basically brought in her own religions and said, I'm going to honor my ancestors and continue on with my own religion. Doesn't sound terrible, but again, we won't talk about Jezebel and how terrible she was or not terrible. But at this time, the people are kind of walking the line of both worshiping Baal and Yahweh. And Elijah says, there's going to be a drought in the land because you're disobeying me, blah, blah, blah. So there's this whole feeling of fear surrounding those who worship Yahweh versus those who worship Baal because Jezebel is going around killing them. So that's kind of the background of the story that we have here. And finally, God is like, Elijah, go tell Ahab it's time for a decision point. It's a come to Jesus moment. And Elijah is sent to Ahab to gather all the people at this mountain. It's Mount Carmel. Incidentally, Elijah means my God is Yahweh. So every time you hear the word Elijah or the name Elijah, you're hearing my God is Yahweh. So it's sort of interesting that this is I'm nerdy about names, so it's a thing. So Elijah sent to Ahab. They gather all the people. It's a come to Jesus moment where Elijah says, you can't be walking this line anymore. You can't decide, oh, I'm worshiping both. You have to choose a side. Neutrality is not an option here. And so what Elijah does is say, okay, we're going to make 2 offerings, like we would. We would make a big altar with stones, and we'd put firewood there, and there'd be, we'd bring a bull and slaughter it and put it on there. And he says, you go first, and you call on your God, and whichever God answers by fire consumes the sacrifice. That's going to be the deciding point. We'll just let the gods speak for themselves. And he says, go ahead, go first. And so they go first, and there's 450, there's actually 850 prophets, depending on how you break it up. There's a lot of them, and one of Elijah. And it's this whole action scene where you can see they're all like in a big trance-like rage, and they're calling on Baal, and eventually it becomes so desperate that just starts mocking them, like, call louder, your God must be on a journey, or maybe he's using the bathroom, let's call a bit louder, he's probably, we gotta call him up so that he'll come and answer. And they start slashing themselves, and it's all just part of their religion to call on their God. Nothing happens. And it says, I want you to catch this from a text, it says, as midday passed, they raved on until the time of the offering, but there was no voice, no answer, and no response. No voice, no answer, and no response. And Elijah says, come closer to me. Come approach me. Draw near. And he rebuilds this altar. The text goes on and on about how he rebuilds it and puts firewood and does all the things. And then he goes, he's a bit extra. He makes a trench around the altar, and now there's a drought, and he says, pour water on the offering. And you're like, dude, it's a drought. Like, what? Where are we getting water from? And then he says, do it again. It's a drought. There's enough water that fills the trench, so this thing is not going to get just lit on fire by just some magic little spark from something. It's clear it's getting drenched with water. And Elijah says, God, answer me. Answer me, O Lord, that this people may know that you are God. You have turned their hearts back. And instantly the fire of the Lord falls and consumes the offering, and it's this clear, like, yes, okay, God is God. And I can just see, to me, this is like an action movie kind of playing out. Anyone says that the Old Testament is boring is not reading closely enough. This is hysterical to me. Like, it's wild, and you know, it's full of action. And Elijah's like, okay, well, clearly Yahweh is God. And he says, seize all the prophets. There's 850 prophets. And he takes them down to a valley and kills them all. Now I'm going to be thinking, first of all, that's a lot. That's a lot of people. I have lots of questions about that. Did he have help? How did, you know, what are we doing here? It seems a little bit dramatic to kill that many people. But then Elijah says to Ahab, the king, he said, go up and eat and drink because the rain is coming. All of this has been about the drought and the rain, and there not being water for the people. And so again, there's this dramatic, it's a dramatic scene. It's something out of like Lord of the Rings, or, you know, I don't know. And he goes up and he's praying, and he prays and prays and prays, and there's nothing. And then his servant sees a cloud coming, and he runs down and tells Ahab, go harness your chariot and run, you know, go, the rain's coming. And then the hand of the Lord comes on Elijah just randomly, and he runs ahead of the chariot. I don't know why that needed to happen, why Elijah needed to beat him to his city. I don't know why he's running. I don't know what the deal is here. But this seems like such an action-filled movie, you know? It's so dramatic. It's so intense. There's so much happening. And Ahab gets to his city and tells Jezebel, his wife, all that Elijah has done. And this is where our text really picks up. Ahab tells Jezebel everything that Elijah has done and how he's killed all her prophets, and it's been a whole thing, and I don't know why Jezebel wasn't there. Like, what's she doing? I have lots of questions about this text. But Jezebel hears about what Elijah has done, and she sends a message to him saying, so may the gods do to me and more also if I do not make your life like the life of one of them by this time tomorrow. And he was afraid. Which seems very anticlimactic when you think about the end of chapter 18. It feels like we could have just stopped there and it had been like, yeah, like it was a hoorah for God and a big triumph, and Elijah's riding high. And it took one woman for Elijah to be like, I'm out. I'm scared. Again, I have lots of questions here. So Elijah's afraid, and he gets up and flees for his life and comes to a place called Beersheba, which is basically Israel does this little hook thing, which is where Mount Carmel is, and then it comes down, and he goes basically from one end of Israel to the other, leaves his servant there, and then walks longer into the wilderness. And he comes and sits under a solitary broom tree and asks that he might die. He says, it is enough now, Lord, take my life, for I am no better than my ancestors. He's just had this epic high. He's had an epic moment with God, several epic moments where he's taunting 800 other people who are trying to worship their God. He's taunting them, then he slaughters them, then the rain comes, then he runs like a madman to a different city. I mean, this is not the kind of guy that you would expect to just run away and be by himself. But he's done. I am no better than my ancestors, he says. And he lies down and falls asleep. And suddenly an angel touches him and says, get up and eat. And he looked, and there at his head was a cake baked on hot stones in a jar of water. And he ate and he drank and he lay down again. And the angel comes back a second time, touches him and says, get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you. So he gets up and eats and drinks. And I just want to pause there for a second. I want us to think about the way that we react sometimes. I don't know about you, but I was in denial for a long time that I get hangry. That's not me. That's my brother, that's my dad, that's my mom, that's not me. Nope, I don't get hangry. And then my husband was like, yeah, you do. And it's the kind of thing where we think about, let's not have a deep conversation until we've had something to eat and drink, and maybe we've slept a little. Is anyone else like that, where you're just like, no, let's not talk about this yet. We need to eat. It's like a walking Snickers commercial. That's my brother. He's a walking Snickers commercial, actually. changes into a different person. But I just think it's very interesting that there is a clear understanding that, yes, all these incredible things have happened, and God is like, eat and drink and sleep. We're not going to talk about it right now. There's no addressing what's happened. There's no even looking at his trauma. There's no saying, yeah, that was rough. It's like, no, eat and drink and sleep. Eat and drink and sleep. And I think it's interesting that there's this acronym, HALT, H-A-L-T, and I know that Jed has this week been teaching us some about that, and I've read that in some other literature and stuff too. That there's also this ladder of a ladder of what? Stress response. Thank you, all the therapists in the room. Thank you very much. Pay attention to the therapist; they know what they're talking about. There's a stress response where you're, at the top of the ladder, you're centered and you're creative and you can do things. And then the next rung down is that fight or flight mechanism. And then the lowest rung is that shutdown. And we've seen Elijah go from top to bottom. We've seen him be on the high of that mountain. We've seen him taunting all these prophets and being at his highest capacity and doing all the things that he's supposed to do. And then we see him run away. He's gone down a rung. He runs away, runs for his life, fight or flight, runs for his life. And then we see him shut down. And God's like, eat and drink and sleep. And eat and drink and sleep. God pays attention to our bodies as much as our spirits. Our lives do matter. Our bodies matter. It is not just in abstract theology that the Spirit is moving. The Spirit sees no disconnection between body and spirit. They are combined. And how can we talk about the Spirit and what's happening in our spirits, or even begin to pay attention to the Spirit if we're hungry or angry or lonely or tired? We have to come back up the rungs of the ladder before we can actually hear what God has to say. The Spirit cares about our bodies too. The text goes on and it talks about how he's got this journey that he has to make. The angel says, get up and eat, otherwise the journey will be too much for you. Where are we going? What are we doing now? We're at the bottom of Israel. What's happening? And he goes 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. A little quick nerd out for you. A lot of times when the Old Testament talks about Horeb, it's actually talking about Mount Sinai. So when you hear that, Mount Sinai in the wilderness, 10 Commandments, all that kind of stuff, that's Mount Horeb. And it's 200 miles away from where he's just sat with the angel. It's 200 miles away, down near the Persian Gulf in Egypt. 200 miles he's walking. And the text kind of passes it by. It says, 40 days and 40 nights to Horeb, the Mount of God. At that place he came to a cave and spent the night there. No big deal. He's walking for 40 days and 40 nights. And I want to pause there for a second and think about that desert road. It's kind of what that sermon that Inez way back during Advent talked about with the Magi and the getting up and looking at the sky and walking and sleeping. And getting up and looking at the sky and walking and stopping and sleeping. It's over and over and over. And I just try to picture, what is Elijah thinking this whole time? Is he talking? Is he raging to God? Like, where are we going? Why am I on my own? What happened? Can we just talk about what just happened? Can we have a moment to talk about what's going on? Do you not care about me, that I'm now on my own and I'm the only one that's left? And he gets up and he walks and he goes to sleep. And it turns out to be about 5 miles a day, which I'm kind of thinking, he probably did more than that, but 40 days and 40 nights is how long he takes to get there. Comes to a cave and spends the night there. That's just wild to me. It's wild to me to think that he kept going. Maybe that was some inner compulsion, that he was being moved by the Spirit to walk. And I feel like most of the story is happening in this wilderness journey, that most of what happens to Elijah actually happens in those 40 days and 40 nights. And for us, it looks like a single line. But we only get to see the Instagram-worthy stuff. We only get to see the highlight reel, right? We don't get to see. No. There it is. Yay, microphones. It's that day in and day out that we don't see of the rest of the world, of other people. I'll just have it right here, thanks. We don't get to see what's actually happening behind the scenes. So I think that when he gets to Horeb, he is really primed. He's like, all right, I'm here now, let's talk. And God's like, well, you're going to sleep. And the word of the Lord comes to him, I assume in the morning, because God's like, you're tired, you've been walking for 40 days, take a nap. The word of the Lord comes to him and says, what are you doing here, Elijah? Really? I'd be like, I can't with you right now. I'm here, what do you want from me? What are you doing here, Elijah? And he says, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. Fair point, right? And God doesn't answer. God says, go out and stand on the mountain before the Lord, before Yahweh. Go out and stand on the mountain before Yahweh, for Yahweh is about to pass by. I feel like I would have mixed emotions about that. I feel like I'd be like, really? Can we just talk about what happened? Can I get some food? I'm walking for 40 days. If we're going to do this again, can we talk? Go out and stand on the mountain before Yahweh, for Yahweh is about to pass you by. And this is a passage that I grew up listening to, does anyone remember Salty the Singing Songbook? Yes. I see you. I feel like this is one of those dramatized ones that I heard. I don't know if it was Salty or if it was someone else. And I remember hearing this and being like, wow, this is wild. This is so cool, this passage. So he goes out there and he stands on the mountain, and there was a great wind, so strong that it was splitting mountains and breaking rocks in pieces before God. But God was not in the wind. I think about our hurricane last week. God was not in the hurricane. And after the wind, an earthquake. But Yahweh was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. But the Lord was not in the wildfire. A fire that was used to consume the altar and the sacrifice and all of that. But God is not in this fire. God is not in this fire. And after the fire, a sound of sheer silence. And the word there is not necessarily sheer, it's actually soft. A sound of soft silence, which sounds like an oxymoron to say that silence has a sound. The sound of sheer silence. And Elijah clearly knows something's going on, and he wraps himself in his cloak and goes out and stands at the entrance of the cave, and a voice comes to him and says, what are you doing here, Elijah? And again, he answers, I have been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts, for the Israelites have forsaken your covenant, thrown down your altars, and killed your prophets with the sword. I alone am left, and they are seeking my life to take it away. And again, God doesn't address the issue. God doesn't say, actually, you're wrong. Actually, here's other stuff that's happened. Actually, you don't have the full picture. Actually. Or, you know what? You're right. That really sucked. That was really hard. And I'm sorry. And this kind of response from God, sometimes I'm like, God, I don't like that. I want you to just tell me what was going on. I want you to affirm me. I want you to validate my feelings. I want to know why. I want to know why you've been silent for 40 days. I want to know why I had to come all the way out here. I want to know why I'm the only one left. Why? And God says, go, return on your way. return your way to the wilderness of Damascus. And then he gives him different people he's going to anoint, and it turns out that this is his legacy. He says he's sending him back to establish his legacy. And at this point, this is great, and when we move on, and Elijah seems to just kind of comply, and there's nothing more said about it. But I think that what the Spirit is trying to get us to do is to pay attention. To pay attention at every turn here. In the beginning, when I talked about the other prophets raving and going on, it says there was no voice, no answer, and no response. You can also translate that and say no voice, no answer, and no attention. There was no attention from this other God given to the people. And God, the Spirit, is saying, pay attention. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? And I think the thing about this passage is that God is trying to say, I'm not always going to be flashy. It's not always going to be an earthquake and a fire and a wind and big action movies where I come upon you and give you superhuman strength and you run, however many miles ahead of a chariot. It's not always going to be that I suddenly bring water when you need it. It's not always going to be this flashy fire and brimstone, earthquake, hurricane sort of situation. Most of the time, because most of this story is happening in the wilderness, it's going to be quiet. It's going to be silent. It's going to be frustrating and aggravating. And I'm not always going to answer the way you want me to, or when you want me to, or how you want me to. What are you doing here? It's not a judgy question. It's not a condemning question. It's easy to feel like God is like, what are you doing here? It should be obvious. It's easy to feel that way, that it's sort of like God talking to Adam and Eve in the garden. Where are you, Adam? God, you know. Like, what are we doing? You know why I'm here. You know where I'm hiding. You know what I'm doing here. It's not a judgment, it's an honest question, because the Spirit is patient. The Spirit waits in the shadows to not distract us from what we really need to hear and acknowledge to ourselves about ourselves. The Spirit won't always show up in flashy ways. Sometimes the Spirit will show up as someone just bringing you food. Someone who comes to do your laundry and vacuums your stairs. Sometimes the Spirit will show up in your own breath when you become quiet and you realize that you've been breathing this whole time without even noticing. The Spirit isn't judgy, but the Spirit isn't a pushover either. It doesn't say to Elijah, well, hang in there. It's been rough. Okay, let's do things. Here's some food. There's this line in a song, I think it's Maverick City. It says, when you're finished, I have so much more. In the waiting, I'm an open door. Stand still and know that I am your Lord. Stand still and know that I am your Lord. When you're finished, when you come to the end of yourself, when you've come to the end of this high, there will be a low. We always talk about, well, if you're in a valley, don't worry, you're going to come out of it at some point, you're going to come up, but what goes up eventually comes down. And that's the reality of our lives, right? That Elijah had this major high moment, that these incredible things happened and God showed up in miraculous ways, and then he runs for his life. And he spends 40 days and 40 nights trudging through the wilderness. And it's desert, people. It's not rainforest, water, and fun things. It's a desert. It's a wilderness. It's a struggle. What are you doing here? We won't always be dazzled. And the Spirit is in those liminal spaces, just as Phil talked to us. The Spirit is in the liminal spaces. The Spirit is in the miraculous that we've just seen. The Spirit is in the exhale, as Bobby was telling us. The Spirit is writing your life as a letter, as Inez told us. The Spirit is that chi that Dr. Cindy Lee was telling us as well. But the Spirit is also in the near and in the mundane, in the pushback that we might not want to receive, in unanswered texts and dashed hopes. The sound of that soft silence is something we experience in our bodies. The Spirit is, yes, the one who's liberated us, but then also the one who reminds us of that liberation. The one who writes our living letters and then helps us read them. It's not a one-time thing in these big flashy moments that we hear about in these sermons of the story of the Spirit, the story doing miraculous things, but that's like 10%. The story of the Spirit is that it's always being written. It's a continuation. That's why this sermon is not, it's the last one in the series, but it's not the last word because it's a constant movement. It's a constant writing. It's a continuation always of the story that the Spirit is writing with us. But what do we do in the silence? Do we listen in the silence or do we try to fill it? Because it feels unnatural and awkward, and a void to be filled rather than a space already occupied. And as I've been thinking about this sermon for a few years now, I've thought about the different ways that silence has impacted me, that there is silence that makes me want to scream. The silence of an ICU room, which really, honestly, is never silent, if we're honest. Constant beeping, but the silence of not hearing my mother breathe. The silence after hearing my dad say, I have cancer. The silence as I sat at a Starbucks writing a paper, trying to keep up with school and hearing conversation behind me. And the silent bedroom of my parents' house where I kept going back to be with them. The empty house, the chaotic rooms. Everything the way that my mom had left it before she went into the hospital, and how it smelled like her. Everything, always clocks, always ticking. But this silence that was heavy and pregnant with fear and doubts. It was also the silent responses from family members I thought I could count on. The silence when tragedy should have brought us together, or I thought would bring us together. Those are the kind of silences, where you're waiting for a callback from a job, when you're getting no after no after no, when you're waiting to find out, are we going to make it through the first trimester? Are we going to get through this next year? But what if silence is also a relief? What if it's a safe place to land, to take a deep breath? What if silence is freedom? I think of the silence after a long day of work, of student appointments, of crazy around, a quiet bath. When you finish that paper you've been slogging over all semester, all quarter, and you finally hit submit, and there's just silence. The silence after laughing, full belly laughs with your friends, where you can't feel your cheeks anymore. That kind of silence, that of watching a child sleep. Finally they're asleep. Or the stillness in the morning. Silence doesn't always have to be unnatural or awkward. It teaches us patience. It teaches us to sit with ourselves, to slow down, to self-reflect. Silence gives us space to breathe, to listen, to exist. The Spirit knows the sound of silence. The Spirit is comfortable with the sound of silence. I am not terribly comfortable with the sound of silence, especially in church. Whenever I have done music or am helping organize something, transitions are a thing for me because I'm like, it can't be silent. It's too awkward. Everyone's weird. We can't do it. Everything is exposed in the silence. Things get exposed in the silence. But it gives us space to breathe, to listen, to exist. And I think it's in those spaces that the Spirit says, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Why are you here? Why are you here? This is not the last word of the Spirit because it's a continuation. Never done. She's never done. and neither are you. When you feel like you're finished, when you feel like you come to the end, when you've hit that shutdown moment, sometimes the Spirit is trying to say, stop, eat, drink, sleep. Sometimes it's best not to have heavy conversations when you're hungry or angry or lonely or tired. Stop, eat, drink, rest. And then what are you doing here? What are you doing here? And I just want us to be conscious that the end of the story is so far off in the distance sometimes. It feels like I would love for it to just be the end of chapter 18 where there's a big, crazy action scene and we can be done. But I think it's in those silence, that sound of soft silence, that the Spirit meets us the most and the most often. It's not always in those flashy moments. In fact, it's usually not in the flashy moments. Most of our lives are not spent in big flashy moments that you can post on Instagram and feel really good about yourself. That's not how it goes. It's in the mundane, it's in the everyday, it's in the pausing and breathing that the Spirit is with us. The Spirit is in those liminal spaces. The Spirit does liberate. The Spirit is writing those letters. But the Spirit is in the silence as well. What are you doing here? What are you doing here? God, we know that you're here in this in-between space, in these places that we don't hear your voice. We don't understand why you've had us travel this far, what it is that we're doing. But your compassion in the question, in the honesty of that question, what are you doing here? Sometimes what we need the most. And God, as we are continuing on, let us not just move to the next flashy thing or the next entertaining reel of our lives. Help us to embrace the silence and not be afraid of it. Or even in our fear to still embrace it. And that fear of the unknown and uncertain, to sit with ourselves because you have never left us. And in the waiting, you're an open door with your arms open wide, waiting, not pushing yourself on us. Help us to be okay with silence so that there can be room for you to meet us there. Help us to pay attention to you. In your name, amen.
In the quiet, in the quiet, in the quiet, I know that you are there. In the quiet, in the quiet, in the quiet, I know that you are there. You are there. I know you're there. in the quiet, in the quiet, in the quiet, I know that you are there. You are there. I know you're there. You are there. I know you're there. Teach us, teach us, teach us how to follow. Teach us, teach us, teach us how to follow you.
We'll sing that together in the quiet.
In the quiet, in the quiet, in the quiet, I know that you are there. In the quiet, in the quiet, in the quiet, I know that you are there. You are there. I know you're there. You are there. I know you're there. So teach us, teach us, teach us how to follow. Teach us, teach us, teach us how to follow. Teach us, teach us, teach us how to follow. Oh, teach us, teach us, teach us how to follow you. In the quiet, in the quiet, in the quiet, I know that you are there. In the quiet, in the quiet, in the quiet, I know that you are there. You are there. I know you're there. You are there. I know you're there.
This one? Okay. As we come to communion tonight, I want us to think too that this is another way of God saying, eat, drink, rest. It can be a great mystery to think about communion, to think about Jesus' body and blood and what it represents for us, and the great mystery and the great important part that is. But I think Jesus was also saying, I want to make sure that you all come together and just eat and drink and rest. So when we think about Jesus on the night that he was betrayed by his friends, by people he was close to, after he'd had several highs and several lows, and they probably thought, it's only going to get better from here, it's always going to be a high. And they didn't realize the low that was about to come. And he gave them this symbol, this bread, to say, this is my body, this is broken for you, that it will be a low, but there will also be highs. And you need to remember to eat and drink. In the same way, he takes the cup and says, this is my promise. This is the promise of my blood, the promise of a covenant, of a remembrance of what I've done for you. So remember, every time that you eat and drink this, that I love you, that you're worth dying for. Remember to eat and drink and rest, because your bodies matter to God. Your bodies matter to God. I'm going to ask Bobby and Inez to come and serve. We have plantains that are gluten-free and grape juice, and we'll all take communion together after we've been served.
Can we give it up for this very pregnant preacher? Pregnant with child and pregnant with the Word of God. I don't know if y'all caught what Caleb was saying about the kids going to camp. There was one little line there where you paused and you said, we didn't just want to give them a mountaintop experience, but a steady something. That's my interpretation. What you said, Caleb. And I just love how the Spirit is writing that story too. And as Nicola was encouraging us, that we don't live in a flashy high or in a flashy Sunday every day, that most usually we're in our everyday, ordinary holiness as you're speaking. And so thank you for that faithful word to remind us to pause and to pay attention to the very mundane things. I don't want to miss God's visitation. And it might be in a breath, in someone's smile, in a quiet cup of coffee in the mornings, time with my caterpillars, as you all know. So thank you for that deposit that you gave to us. That will always stay with us. And thank you all, church, for receiving this sermon series as well in the story of the Spirit. May the Spirit, may she continue to write that story in your life, and may you be able to come and grab the mic and give a testimonial of what the Spirit is doing in your life as well. I have several announcements. And so I'm looking at my notes so that I don't forget. First and foremost, if you would like to connect with Pastor Bobby and I, you may go to thechurchwehopefore.com. There is an I'm New tab that you can fill out and connect with us. You can connect with Pastor Bobby, myself, separate and together. We can go out for boba, tea, cafecito, pan dulce, whatever you would like. We would like to hear your story as well. Why are you here? What is the Lord doing in your life? How are you seeing God pass by in the story of your life? And so we'd love to connect with you. Some of you already have, so we encourage you to do so. Very important. Next Sunday is Sabbath Sunday, and just so you all know, we have these communal rhythms of rest. We don't believe that we should always go, or burn out, even as church and church leaders. And there's these moments in the year of the church, in the life of the church, that sometimes these weekends there's less happening, or we have even less volunteers. We don't want to burn out our volunteers and have them do 10 things because there's less of us in one day. That doesn't mean that's the only place we gather on a Sunday. So that's why we have these Sabbath Sundays every once in a while during the year. Next Sunday is Labor Day weekend. That's one of those Sundays. Invite somebody you haven't hung out with, take them to the beach, go to a park, do something together. But we will not be here. So just wanted to let you know. There are several events that I want to mention, and you're not going to remember many of the details that I'm going to give you. For that reason, if you can go to, I don't know if we have that slide, yes, to the Church Center app. If you want to take your phone out, if you don't already have this app in your phone and scan that QR code, this is the one place where you can find everything of what I'm about to share and be able to look at the details. So whether it's the app, you can go to the events, to the calendar page and see all the things that are happening, or you can also find these events at thechurchwehopefore.com. A few that I don't want you to forget about. Becca, where are you? You can raise your hand and say, hey. Becca is organizing a gathering of people. She found this free resource in the community called Music in the Park. And so next Saturday, no, not this coming Saturday, but Tuesday the 9th. Saturday the 9th at 6:30 p.m. Again, all that information you're not going to remember. But if you get the app or go to the events page online, you'll be able to see that she is just trying to gather us to listen to some free music and gather together and watch the story of the Spirit, tie your story with someone else's story, and just hang out. You want to add something to that? So for those of you who are online, she's saying that if you cannot find Becca, find the chair tied to the balloon. See which one you find first. Find the balloon, tie the chair to where Becca is sitting. And yes, bring your dinner, chairs, a dessert, something to share, and just come get together. If you're new especially, and you need an easy on-ramp to get to know other people, get to know Becca. She's wonderful, and she's gonna gather us. I'm gonna be there. So Music in the Park, September 9th. September 10th, that's a Sunday. Guess who's preaching that day? Mondo. I'm putting you on the spot. You're like, thank you. Thank you for telling everybody I'm preaching. Yes, Armando just said yes to our invitation to come preach. So I just wanted to let people know that when they come back, they're going to hear the Armando Scott preach. So that will be another day. That's Sunday. And then September 15th, I don't think we have it up there, but those of you who have tickets to the Green Line event that got rescheduled because of the hurricane, um, wink, wink, hurricane, that was not a hurricane, thank the Lord, it wasn't worse. But those of you who bought tickets for that day, I know Rochelle would like for me to say this again, it got rescheduled to September 17th. That is a Sunday. So again, you all feel free to miss church. If you would like to go to greenlinehousing.com and you'll be able to, if you were not planning on going, but now all of a sudden you want to go, this is a fundraiser to be able to rectify the historical legacy of redlining and the housing injustice in that. And so it's trying to raise money and fundraise for Black and Brown communities to be able to own a home. So that's been rescheduled to September 17th. Last but not least, we have another event that has to do with justice, and it's the Racial Solidarity Project. And would you like to come up, Rochelle? And I do know that we have a slide for that. So there's several of you all. Nicole and Nicola and Rochelle have been helping Phil Allen get ready for this event. So if you can tell us a little bit more.
Hello, church. So as Pastor Inez mentioned, Nicola and I have been working with Phil Allen for his 5K coming up on September 23rd, and that fundraiser is going to benefit the Racial Solidarity Project. And for those that don't know, I'll just kind of read a description from the website. The Racial Solidarity Project is a nonprofit organization that focuses on several pillars of activism that aim to facilitate spaces of solidarity across racial lines. Those pillars of activism are justice, equity, advocacy, education, and wellness. So this event is not only going to raise money for the Racial Solidarity Project, but also for Green Line Housing. So it's a 2-for-1. So it's September 23rd. We do have a location. It's going to be at the Garfield Park in South Pasadena, where we've had it before. It's a really fun event. You can run, you can walk, you can also participate virtually if you're not able to do so in person. But all of the information can be found at the website, which is the-rsp.org. So please do sign up. The early registration deadline has been extended, so the cost is $50 to sign up for the race. You get a medal when you finish, you get a swag bag, all kinds of stuff, get people cheering you on. So please do come out. It's Saturday, September 23rd at the Garfield Park. Any questions? Ask Nicola, Nicole, or myself. Thank you.
And just so you all know, our Shalom and Justice Fund is funding with your tithes and offerings many of these events, not only the OC United Camp, but we also are funding the RSP race and also Green Line Housing. And so you all know, our church, as we know, we believe in the justice of Jesus, and these are some of the places where the Spirit has led us to support these causes because we see the life, love, and justice of Jesus happening in those places. Okay, 2 more things, I promise. 2 more. I've been gone for 2 weeks, so they gave me announcements today, like, you've been gone? Okay, you get announcements. But these are all important things, Jesus and justice and all good things. But we are starting small groups very soon meaning like September, and at different places in the month of September. Guess where you'll be able to find out what small groups are studying? Church Center app, thank you. And so there are returning community groups that are going to get restarted, and then there's new groups that are starting that are topical as well. So as we're loading them up, be patient with us because we're gathering this information, but you can go there now and start seeing some of these groups. One of these groups is Jason and Janice's group. They are in need of perhaps some, yay, Patrick is excited. Like he's clapping over here already. Just want to let you know. He's got y'all. They are going to need some childcare perhaps. So and y'all are going to be meeting on Thursdays, right? If I remember correctly. So if you might be able to provide childcare, or you have a child, like a teenager, that would like to make some money and also provide childcare for the needs of that group, talk to Jason or talk to Janet, because they could use your help. So again, Church Center app, in the next 2 weeks, we're going to be rolling some new groups as well as returning groups. Please check it out. Babe, we have already mentioned in the newsletter that we need to be out of this place, out of this building on September the 30th. For those of you who don't know, this building property has been bought by a new church, and many of us renters who have been here for a very long time have been asked to leave. And so just so you all know, the leadership team is creating and crafting a game plan to be able to say hello, goodbye. This month will be that month of saying hello, goodbye in many ways during the liturgies on Sundays, and also invite you in active ways to actually come one day, or maybe two, we don't know yet, to come and move the things that belong to us into the new place, which is Pasadena Mennonite Church up the street. I've told you all before that we trust that we worship a migrant God, and God is with the migrant church. And so as we move, we believe that God has gone ahead, God is with us now, and we are excited for what is to come. But we will give space, because we need those moments to pause and breathe and give thanks for the work that God has done here, as well as open our hands and say welcome to this new place at Pasadena Mennonite Church. So we will be rolling out those ways for you to engage, to come say hello, goodbye in this month of transition. Bobby, am I missing anything else that you'd like to say about the building? We just want to keep you informed as best we can as we go. So, all right, preacher woman, would you like to give us the benediction before we end?
If you're able, would you stand and open up your hands to receive this benediction? May the God who is familiar with all of our sounds of silence be with you as you go, as you transition, as you go into the mundane and the everyday of every aspect of your life. May you listen and pause. May you ask yourself, what are you doing here? And may you not be afraid of silence. Amen.